I'm afraid this is going to be the last snippet. I'm tired of snippets, and I'm sure you're tired of snippets as well. Anyway, I'm going off to Kunur for 2 weeks. Today's snippet is a rather difficult one. It's on music and medicine. Music is an innate feature of the human psyche. It is deeply rooted in human nature and is perhaps a fundamental attribute and practice of the human species. You hear music all the time. More people listen to music these days, or in the present years, in the recent years, than they've ever done before. You have music everywhere. On the computer, on your CDs, in your car, in the aeroplane, in the streets, in the subways, in the large concert halls. It's music, music all the way. Music mixed in your path like mad. But how old is music? I think there is no culture in the world that does not have music. Anthropologists have shown that even the pygmies in Africa have music. The cannibals eat human beings and sing when they do so. The aborigines in Australia have music. Music dates from antiquity. The caves in France and in Spain show Paleolithic man also probably had music. On the caves you see paints or drawings of men and women dancing, and there have been remnants of a flute found in these caves. Perhaps the first musical instrument in the world, therefore, might well have been a flute. That's as far as the date of music goes to antiquity. But what is its origin? How did it come about? I think that indeed is a mystery. In India, for example, all things good and beautiful have a divine stamp, and it is believed, therefore, that music indeed is a gift from the gods. Religion and philosophy are closely linked to music in India. And religion and philosophy in our part of the world often explains the inexplicable. It is believed, or has been believed, there are two kinds of sounds of music. One is produced by the vibrations of ether. This is the sound inaudible to the human ears, but it is the delight of the gods. Pythagoras called it the music of the spheres. And there is another sound, which is the struck sound. That is the sound produced by human beings, the sound of music. Is there any connection between the unstruck sound of the gods, the music of the spheres, and the struck sound? They believe so. They indeed believe so. Any note which is sung or which is played does not stand by itself. It is believed that it has sprung from silence. And at the end, when the note ends in a musical play or in a musical setting, it is not really the end. It merges into silence, therefore it goes back from indeed where it came. A beautiful philosophical thought. If you take it metaphysically, well, it's a supreme being which plays life on earth, structures the universe, controls the universe, orders the universe. And at the end of your existence, you go back from where you came. That's a nice thought. Now, this is as far as East philosophy and Indian philosophy is concerned. But the origin of music in the West has been strongly debated, discussed, and researched upon. Was it related, for example, to nature, to the rippling waters, to the thunder, to the peaceful lakes, to the rough or calm seas? No, great musicians, and including, I'm just quoting one, Stravinsky felt that no, that cannot be so. These are unconnected sounds, unconnected tones, even if they are tones, and they have to be connected and organized to become music. And it is only the human act that can do so. Did music arise from bird songs? The thrush is supposed to sing 9 different tunes and mix them together. They say no again. Researchers say no again. Because if you look at primitive music, and that's from where music ultimately evolved, it has no resemblance to bird songs. Did it evolve from speech? There again, there is a dispute. Some say it did to some extent, and some say it didn't. In fact, Darwin and both Jean-Jacques Rousseau, the father of the French Revolution, both believed very strongly that singing and music came before speech. So there you have it. And the latest Western view is difficult to understand. It is believed, they say, that music arose from the relationship between the mother and a child, infant child, the lalling that goes on between the mother and the child, and the noises that the child produces in relation to that, the bond between the mother and the child, the noise, if you call it, or the music, or the words between the mother and child, that is the start of music. I find it difficult to understand. Let's say that the origin of music, for all practical purposes, remains a real mystery. But music has evolved over the years. Music has evolved, as you well know. You have numerous instruments, huge concerts, large number of people playing music to large audiences in large halls. A number of musical instruments, but there is no question that most people feel that the greatest musical instrument is the human voice. I'd just like, out of sheer interest, to give 2 examples of the kinds of music. The grand opera, for example. It's remarkable. It is a situation where you are exposed, the audience is exposed to a slice of life, where passions, emotions are sung. Passions and emotions are pinpointed and then magnified 10 times or 100 times more than what they actually occur in real life. Good and bad, envy and jealousy, steadfastness and unfaithfulness, every possible emotion. These emotions are within a very simple story that can perhaps be said, spoken in about 4 or 5 lines. But unlike in a play, when they are spoken, they are sung with music, and they are hurled at the audience in such a manner that, uncensored by the brain, they make a great impact within the heart. That is what great opera is all about. And the other form of music which is really very important is jazz. This is something which is not really composed readily. It is improvised. And the great thing about it, therefore, the player and the composer is the same. And the improvisation can be fantastic and can be beautiful, and appeals to a large number of people who might even prefer it to actual Western classical music. I've spoken about the evolution of music. I want to tell you that there are probably 1,000 billion neurons in the brain. Each neuron has perhaps 10,000 or 100,000 interconnections. And when musical appreciation occurs, this interconnection is marked. And obviously, the interconnection in you and me is different from that of a great composer or a great virtuoso. It's impossible to believe that a virtuoso can memorize in his mind so many numerous concertos, so many numerous pieces of music, or a conductor can have in his head, without reading anything, so many pieces of music. It's impossible for me to visualize that. It's nothing short of genius. I thought I should like to tell you that. Now I must bring some medicine into the picture, and therefore I hope my boys and girls in the hospital who have fallen asleep will awaken. Just as music can be deeply appreciated, deeply loved, there are instances where the appreciation of music, the faculties that appreciate music, are affected. Sometimes by disease, sometimes by disturbance in blood supply, sometimes in disturbances in trauma, and sometimes for no apparent obvious reason. I'm going to give you a few instances of that. I think it was MacDonald Critchley who described 10 patients of his with what he called musicogenic epilepsy, which means when they heard music, they sometimes had a fit. And he quotes the instance of one of his patients who was a great music critic in New York, who used to give his musical criticism in all great musical features that happened in that city, suddenly developed a fit during an opera. And he found very often now he started developing fits whenever he heard music, till ultimately even one note of music, he said, produced a fit. So he had a fear of music. And he wanted to avoid any place where there was music. But where in the world can you get a place where there is absolute certainty of no music? That is musicogenic epilepsy. And there I will now describe an unusual, I've seen musicogenic epilepsy a couple of times, but I've never seen a patient with what is called musicophilia. Oliver Sacks describes an individual who had a cardiac arrest while talking on the telephone at a railway station. He collapsed. He was resuscitated. He was well after 2 days. He felt that he could see, hear, speak, think, everything was all right. There were no sequelae to the cardiac arrest. And then suddenly, after a lapse of a week or so, he developed a sudden urge to learn music. He was a person who was not particularly interested in music at all, and that too piano music. And that too, he was enamored by Ashkenazi playing Chopin. So he was enamored of the music of Chopin. So can you believe it? He soon says he started hearing music. And he said, this is not an hallucination as the doctor tells me it is. It is an inspiration. And what did he do? He started learning the piano. He started playing the piano beautifully in a short period of time. He started translating the music that he was hearing within him in notation which he had never known before. And he ended up by giving a concert in which he played a number of scherzos and ballads of Chopin, and played an own piece, one of his own composed pieces, which was brilliant. I've never seen something like this before. Oliver Sacks describes this as musicophilia. And just as you can appreciate music well, sometimes you cannot appreciate it at all. You cannot reproduce a tune, you are tonal deaf in your tonality. And sometimes in complete amusia, music is not there at all. And when music is played, they hear it as a loud screech. That indeed must be terrible. It must be very rare. It's called amusia. And then you have what is called the Mozart effect. What is the Mozart effect? It was shown that when the music of Mozart was listened to by a group of young individuals, say between 10 and 16, their cognitive powers significantly improved compared to those of an equal age group that was not listening to Mozart at all. This is indeed fantastic. It means, therefore, that music can help the brain cells responsible for cognition. There was a great excitement over this when this was reported, but it was shown that in due course of time, the Mozart effect disappeared. But it is exciting. The fact that music can do that, perhaps music of other composers might do the same. Perhaps music heard for a much longer period of time could be even better. So there is a great field of research as far as this goes. Then I want to tell my boys and girls a very important fact. A right-handed person appreciates, decodes language and speech with the left hemisphere. The opposite hemisphere. But where is music decoded and appreciated? Amazingly, it's in the right hemisphere. The same hemisphere for a right-handed person. This is interesting and extremely important. And let me give you some examples that have made people realize that. It was shown by some neurologists that a person who was a bad stammerer stammered so badly that it was sometimes difficult to hear him, sometimes broke into an excellent song for a short period of time. It was believed that the decoding or encoding of stammering was on the left side. But the musicality sometimes broke through and he could sing. More importantly, a person who had damaged his left dominant hemisphere, either by disease or by trauma, it has been shown that his musicality remains unimpaired. And there was a classic report of an individual who was a musician, who had a damaged left hemisphere. But not only could he appreciate music, he could teach music. Not only that, he composed a symphony, which was perhaps the best symphony he had composed. And that was said by Shostakovich. He said, this is indeed a brilliant symphony. And I cannot imagine a man who has sensory aphasia. Sensory aphasia means you tell him something, he doesn't understand what you're talking about. He has lost the symbolic significance of speech. Yet his musicality is so preserved that he could compose a perfect, excellent symphony. And finally, I'm reminded of Oliver Sacks' book, The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat. But this is really remarkable. I'm not quite sure what the damage in the brain was, but it was apparent that he could see, but he could not recognize the significance of what he saw. So he mistook his wife for a hat all the time. But remember that he could dress himself, bathe, shave, clothe himself, singing. When he would sing, he could do all that. His life was in an utter shambles. But the only aspect which gave some semblance to living, some semblance to reality, was music. That's indeed remarkable. Now, I would like to speak a little more on man in relation to medicine. Reminded of a famous quote. Music had the charm to assuage savage breast, to soften rocks, or to bend a twisted oak. Music really can relieve or to some extent mitigate suffering. And it also enables the mind, which is agitated, to remain quiet calm and cool. Research has shown that it can reduce the pulse rate or the heart rate, reduce the blood pressure, reduce stress. Stress hormones secreted during stress are reduced. Also, that it relieves pain and it relieves the medication that is often used to relieve pain. And therefore it has been used in many aspects of medicine. To relieve pain, for example, in many post-operative states, in cancers, for example, in severe burns. It was used during both the world wars for wounded soldiers with bad injuries, to help convalescents. Used in any prolonged illness, it helps. Question arises, how does it help? Of course it helps by acting on the mind. And how does that happen? The mind and the body are a closely related complex. The mind-body complex is being researched upon to a great extent. How the mind affects the relief of pain, perhaps. The secretion of opioids within the brain or at the nerve endings. Perhaps the neuroendocrine apparatus through the nerves is stimulated. And that perhaps promotes healing. One doesn't know, but the fact remains that it does help. And more experiments have been shown to prove so. Patients, for example, who listen to music, pre-op, intra-op, and post-op, have a better recovery. Their heart rates are slower, their blood pressures are not raised during surgery, and they recover faster. Most important of all, a recent experiment in the intensive care unit, where two groups of patients, identically ill, proven by the SOFA score. One group, they were on ventilators, all of them. One group was made to listen to music through phones. Many of them were obtunded. And the other group was treated otherwise, but not listening to music. It was shown that in those where music was given, the pressors, that is, the pressure support that was used was less. The amount of medication given for relief of pain was much less. They got off the ventilator faster and they recovered better. So there is increasing evidence to show that music really is closely linked to the health of suffering and to the relief of patients in many aspects and many fields of medicine and surgery. It's so important. The next thing that I would like now to talk about is, does music affect morality? And this is interesting because Plato, Aristotle, Pythagoras all felt yes, good music when heard right from childhood and carried on does affect morality and does influence character for the better. The other thing which really has been asked by many people is, how is it that an art form which you could love, appreciate, but yet cannot translate in any way, in any form, an art form which has no dogma, an art form which is completely dissociated from the external world, an art form which is not associated with spoken or written language, does not give any information or knowledge? How is it that it's so intrinsically interwoven into the life, thoughts, and psyche of human beings? It's an interesting thought, and there are many who have written about it. I shall just give you the current thinking about it. It is felt that music echoes the inner life of man. This is what Hegel states. Bergson, another philosopher, Norwegian philosopher, puts it more beautifully. He says, your inner life is like a melody which begins, continues, indivisible, unstoppable, from the beginning to the end of your existence. It echoes that. So that's a point, I think, which is worth remembering and worth thinking about. The next point which I'd like to bring out is the relation of music to mathematics. I could never believe it till I read about it. Mathematics is the beauty of numbers. Music is the beauty of tones. Where is the difference? Mathematics is exclusive. Beautiful equation, you wouldn't understand, only the mathematician would. Music is all inclusive. And most important of all, music is far more emotive. I forget the name of the philosopher who said it. One of the modern philosophers who said that the discovery or the creation of higher mathematics is perhaps one of the greatest creations of humankind. It can only equal the creation of great music. And I remember this particularly in relation to the great Indian mathematical wizard Ramanujan, who worked with Hardy in Cambridge. And Hardy had of course, was very vocal about mathematics. Ramanujan was silent, was equally or greater, more brilliant. And Hardy said that the most important features of great mathematics, he says, are generality, number one. Number two, substance. Number three, inevitability. Number four, economy. And number five, unexpectedness. Can you believe it? These can be beautifully applied to great music. Generality, music must not have any national ethos, any national boundaries. It must be for all. Great music is for all. And substance, depth, yes. If it does not have substance, it is monotonous. Its tonality is not half as good. Might be repetitive. And might pass off like some of the tunes that one hears in ordinary life. Most important of all, inevitability. That I thought was beautifully put. He said that great music must end, and when it ends, the end must feel inevitable. This is the way it has to be. And it has to be like this, must be like that. Inevitable. That's lovely too. Then he said unexpectedness. That is a hallmark of originality and is related to inevitability. A change in tone, a change in key. Has to be. Unexpected, but has to be. And economy is perhaps the least important here. There are, by and large, great music is economical, but not always so. For example, Wagner's music is opulent. You cannot conceive of a great Wagner piece which is economic. So this is how it is, the relationship between mathematics and music. And think now, I would like to end at this point in time. I would like to say my own feelings of what I feel when I hear great music. When I hear great music, sometimes, particularly in the darkness of the night, it's not often these days, but when I do, I feel there is another world outside the world we live in. I feel that the human spirit is eternal, no beginning, no end, forever. I feel that music enables me to commune with my inner consciousness, inner stream of consciousness. In doing so, music gives more substance to life, more beauty to life, a transcendental blessing that enlifts, ennobles the spirit of human beings.